Hey, Jeff Blanchard here. Welcome to Mobility Monday. And I'm here to talk to you a little bit more about a couple different topics that will help you decrease your pain and help improve your quality of life. Today's topic is how the hip and the back are related, and if you have good hip motion, that'll help your back feel better. Okay, let's just start off with looking at a little bit of anatomy. If you understand the anatomy and what's going on with the forces of daily life, then you're going to better understand why you have maybe that pain that's going on in your back, or why you're having a little bit of a harder time walking. So here I have a pelvis, and I have the leg bones, the femurs attached to the pelvis. Now I know we've done episodes in the past where we've talked about the hip and we've looked at some anatomy, so this might be a little bit of a review. But the spine, which goes up here, and the hip, they're neighboring joints. Okay, so they're not very far apart, which means that the hip is going to influence the spine, and the spine is going to influence the hip. Usually it's the hip that influences the spine. And the reason for that, so if you look at the hip joint, you can see that it's a ball and socket joint. You've got this ball here, and you've got this deep socket. So it's the largest joint in the body, and it's a nice deep socket because you're standing on your hips all the time. And so that being a ball and socket, it's allowed to move in a lot of different planes. So you can go forward, backwards, out to the side, in, and then you can rotate one way and rotate the other way. That's 6 planes of motion. So when the hip is moving well, the joints that are in the surrounding area feel better and do better. But if the hip is not moving the way it should move, then the forces that the hip would absorb get absorbed somewhere else. And that's what starts to cause pain. It could be down the chain into the knee, and the knee starts having pain because the hip's not moving properly, or it's up into the back, which is really common, which is so often when people come in with back pain. One of the main places we're looking is right at the hip. What is the hip not doing right that's leading to this back having some pain? So again, the hip joint is that really big ball and socket joint, has all those different degrees of motion. Whereas the spine, between every vertebra, the joints between the spine are about as big as your fingernail. And so those are little teeny joints, and they just move past each other in a little bit. And there's a lot of them all the way up the spine. But if you can think about, this is going to take a lot more force than those little joints of your spine. So again, explaining why so oftentimes we see people who come in with that low back pain. So there's a lot of muscles that sit around the hip that give the hip stability, especially on the back side. So we got those buttocks, which again we talked about in a previous episode. Muscles on the side of the hip. All those muscles create a lot of stability, but sometimes they can also get really stiff and tight. Why might they get stiff and tight? Because you aren't moving enough. So most individuals these days, when they go to work and they sit in a chair, and they're doing a lot of sitting through the day. Now when you're sitting, your hip is in this position all day long. So it is in this position all day long. So the muscles in the back of the hip get a little bit more stretched out. The muscles in the front of the hip tend to get tighter. The muscles in the back of the hip get weaker and weaker. And then the deep portions of the hip that we call the capsule, which is underneath all the muscle, then that gets tight as well. So all of this paints a picture that the hip might not be moving in the right way. So again, then the stress and the trauma come to the back. Now, as we age, we also tend to get stiffer. And many people, as they age, they don't move as much as when they were younger, which just speeds this process up and makes it worse. So it is so important that as you get older, you keep your body moving, and so you can continue to keep things flexible. So it's more likely that you'll feel better and less likely that you'll have some of these pains coming on because things are getting tight. Now, the spine is mainly built to be able to forward and backward bend. The spine does that really well. Now let's say the hip is super tight and the hip doesn't bend as well. Then what's going to happen is if my hips are really tight and I forward bend, I'm going to forward bend like this. And my pelvis doesn't move much at all because my hamstrings and the backs of my hips are so tight. So then if I keep doing this, I'm going to get looser and looser in my back, which might cause me back problems. So that's a forward bending problem. The other direction is oftentimes the other way. If I'm too tight in the front, which is very common, then when I go and I take a step and I walk, when I take a step forward, this leg is back and this leg is forward. Well, if I'm really tight here, then this leg doesn't go very far that direction. So what happens then is all that stress, instead of being absorbed by the hip, again, it just goes right into the back. So here's my pelvis that's walking, one leg in back, one leg in front. And you can see that, that this leg, if it doesn't go very far back in that direction, then the spine will have to do this. So every time you take a step, this happens to the spine, which over time will cause the cartilage to break down faster, and it will cause pain to occur at the joint level, which is oftentimes why you come and see us. So how can we help you avoid that scenario and improve your hip mobility, and so your spine doesn't take a hit? So I'm going to teach you just a couple of simple stretching exercises, mobility exercises that you can do at home that'll help keep you from, hopefully, from getting into this scenario where your hips get really tight. All right, so the first exercise I'd like to show you is one that you'll do on the floor. This is going to require kneeling on the floor. If you feel like your knees might not like it, you can kneel on a pillow and put that pillow under your knee, and it'll make it much more comfortable. So you're going to get onto the floor in this tall kneeling position. Again, your knee can be on that pillow. And what you're going to do here is you're going to try to get your hip to go backwards. Okay, so that's the one where it's going to help you with your ability to walk. It's going to open up your hip. So what I'm going to do from here is I'm going to first tighten my abdominals. And once my abdominals are engaged, then I'm going to bring my hip this way. And that's it. It's a small motion. I keep my trunk vertical. I'm feeling a pulling in the front of this down hip. I might hold that for, say, 30 seconds. And then after the 30 seconds, then back out. And that's it. Now the stretch is gone. Okay, so a couple things that I see patients do on a regular basis. When they try to do this stretch, they'll get here and they'll do this. There's no stretch if you move your whole body forward. Or what they'll do is they'll forget to engage their abdominals, and they'll do this, but they'll bow out their belly like this, and they're just arching their back. With that, you're not going to feel the stretch either. You've got to keep your abdominals engaged, go forward, and then you're going to feel the stretch down into this area in the front of your hip. So that would be stretch number one, to open up the front of your hip and improve your ability for walking and getting that hip behind you. Another thing that you can do is work on your hips going in front of you. Okay, so I know that Bart in the past talked a little bit about some exercises to do this. I'll show you my favorite exercise to help those hips come in front of you to be able to get more into this position. And so I'll just demonstrate here on the table. You can do this on your bed or you can do this on the floor. So you're going to get into this position. This is called child's pose. You're going to drop back into this position and drop all the way down. And so you get down into here, and what you're doing is you are flexing through the hip. You're stretching your hip. You're also stretching your knee. And if I were on the floor, I'd also be stretching my ankles, but my feet are hanging, and that's fine. And you're stretching your back, and you're stretching your shoulders. So child's pose is actually a great stretch. It is a yoga pose, and we're hitting multiple points of the body. It should feel pretty good in your spine. It should feel good in the other joints of your body. If it does not feel good, please do not do the exercise. If something's painful, that would be what you would maybe want to talk to us about. But again, that's going to help that hip be able to move more into the forward direction, which is going to help you be able to bend over better or squat better and give you more mobility in that plane. The other direction is rotation, so hip rotation. And I'm going to show you one exercise that works on both rotational directions. For this, you can, again, lie down on the floor. That works really well, or you can lie down in your bed. So I'll be here on the table. And so you want to have your feet positioned maybe 2 feet apart. And then what you're going to do is you're going to let your knees go to one side and then let your knees go to the other side. So I'm going to bring my knees to the right like this. Now in that position, I might kind of let my arms spread out and get into this position and just hold this stretch for 5 to 10 seconds. So I'm rotating my right leg to the outside and I'm rotating my left leg to the inside. And then I'm going to switch. I'm going to bring my legs over here and I'm going to drop them down the other way. And now I'm rotating my left to the outside and my right to the inside. So again, holding this for a good 10 seconds at least, breathe, relax, and then switch. Again, go in the opposite direction. My arms staying on the floor or on my bed as I'm doing this exercise. So this is to help improve that hip rotational mobility. This should, again, just feel good. If it gives you any problems in your back, because it does cause the back to move a little bit into some backward motion, then of course don't do the exercise if it causes you back pain. All right, so thanks for joining me again for today's Mobility Monday. If you enjoyed the episode, give us a like, subscribe to our channel. Please share it with a friend, especially if you know they're having some back troubles. This might be something that can help them out. And remember, until next time, motion is lotion.